Welcome everyone to the ANCAD Regional Community Funding Fair. Hopefully you'll just be coming online as the webinar is due to start. We'll give you a moment or two to come on. Okay, let's get started. Kia ora, te whalawa, ni hao. Good morning, welcome everyone. My name is Stephanie Maitland and it's my pleasure to be your host today for the ANCAD Funding Fair. Having completed hundreds of funding applications for schools, sports organisations and charities across the country, I fully appreciate how important this funding source is for you. I also appreciate what a difficult time it is for many across the North Island in particular, and I'm glad you've been able to join us today. It's my pleasure to ask Fiona Brennan, General Manager of ANCAD, to say a few words.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai, talofa, warm Pacific greetings, ni hao, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending the Auckland Regional Funding Fair 2023. And welcome to all of those returning who've attended our funding fairs before. Fiona Brennan, Tokaringua General Manager of ANCAD. I'm joined by Simon Ritchie, our Training and Capability Lead, and Stephanie Maitland of Maitland and Associates, who works closely with ANCAD in all matters relating to our funding. We're excited to bring you this webinar this morning. Auckland North Community and Development was established in 1974, and since then we've been providing training and capability programs to support the for-purpose sector across the Auckland region and in some cases across the country. A special welcome to all of our speakers this morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'd just like to acknowledge the Gift Collective, Foundation North, Department of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Pacific Peoples, and Lister Presbyterian Health Trust. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this really important information. And I'd just like to mihi all of those affected by the floods across the country and in the Auckland region. It's times like this that we realise that having these productive, effective relationships with our funders and understanding the mutual priorities that we have is more important than ever. I'd like to hand over to Stephanie now to introduce our speakers, and I hope you really enjoy this morning and find it useful, and I'll leave her to explain how you can contribute and ask questions during the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So a few housekeeping things. A copy of the slides will be emailed to you for all registered attendees. The webinar is also being recorded and how to access that will also be sent to you. At the end of each presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask the presenter questions. Please do so via the Q&A box on your screen. This is the only box we'll be monitoring. By all means, use the chat box to introduce yourselves. But the Q&A box will be the one that we'll be monitoring for your questions. In case you're not aware, ANCAD offers a wide range of professional development opportunities via their LIFT program. The website there is on screen for you. Some ones that are upcoming. Becoming Funder Ready, which is on next Thursday week, the 2nd of March, cost of $35. Register via the LIFT website. Strategic Grant Seeking and Writing Workshop, that's in person at the Mary Thomas Centre in Takapuna on the morning of Thursday the 30th of March, the cost of $80.
Stephanie, can I just interject? Sorry about that. If you're able to share your screen from the beginning, we can only see the small size screens there.
It's showing perfectly on mine. Is it not showing on yours?
Not on mine, and it may not be on others, but just maybe from the beginning, the slides, if you're able to click on that for folks.
So, can you see that one?
Okay, not quite yet, but perhaps if you go to, I think you're up to slide 4 now. We can just see slide 1 from my end. Great, that's slide 2 there. Yep.
So from the beginning is that one, and then that's the next one. I can see slide 2. Can you not see that one?
All right, it's just taking its time to load. Fiona may be able to also say what she can see too. Sorry, folks, we'll just iron this out so people can just see everything.
I'm the same. I can just see the PowerPoint, but not in presenter view. So not in the slideshow view.
Oh, I wonder why that is. Okay, so you can see that now. You can see slide 2.
Slide 2, yes. Great.
Okay, we'll just do it that way. That's probably easier because slide 3, so becoming funder ready. So practical approach to funding and planning and funding. I spoke about the strategic grant seeking writing website workshop. Sorry, you can't see them properly. And then governance matters. So that's some free sessions. You've missed the first one, but there are some great ones throughout the rest of the year from Carol on focus on governance principles for boards and committees of organisations. It's all via Zoom, and as I said, it's free. Resourcing leaders in times of change. There's one coming up next week. Some other dates there. That's a bi-monthly Zoom meeting for leadership and those in leadership that hold leadership responsibilities and the not-for-profit community organisations. Another great program that NCAD offers is the Auckland Community Accounting. So it's a free and confidential service for those that's offering support and assistance on accounting matters to small and medium community organisations within Auckland. Go have a look at the ADCAD website for further information. I know many of you use the funding guide or funding directory from last year. In 2023, funding guide is now available. There are limited printed editions, so if you wanted a hard copy, please order it today. We've widened it a little bit this year to include other fundraising information, other fundraising activities that you could or should be using. And as funders merge, close, change, we've made some changes to how that's displayed this year, but certainly a resource that you should be getting. Contacts on screen on how to do that. If you aren't a member of ANCAD, I suggest you become one. There are some great benefits to do that, and have a look at the ANCAD website, becoming a member page to be able to join. Sorry, it's not looking probably as great as it could be on screen, but we'll work our way through that very quickly. So today's speakers, we're very lucky to have the Ministry for Pacific Peoples, the Gift Collective, the Lister, Presbyterian Health Trust, Foundation North and the Department of Internal Affairs to join us today. But before we welcome our first speaker, Simon from ANCAD will ask you the first question in today's poll.
All right, here we go, folks. If you can respond to the question here, how many funding applications does your organisation submit per annum?
Okay, so the majority are less than 10. It's still moving slightly. We're nearly there.
We're nearly there. Can we get to 100? And then I'll end the poll in a few seconds. Here we go. Countdown. 3, 2, and 1, folks. There we go. We'll end the poll and we'll share the results.
Thanks, Simon. So less than 10. So either you're a smaller organisation and that's sufficient, or you are missing out on a number of funding opportunities that you could be exploring. So hopefully those are, part of those will be speaking to you today to be able to widen your fundraising network. Okay, so we'll get to our first speaker today. Just a reminder, please, questions at the end. of each presentation, please use the Q&A box that we'll be monitoring. Our first speaker today, it's my pleasure to welcome Adrian, the Senior Advisor Regional Partnerships for the Ministry for Pacific Peoples. There's a couple of colleagues with him, and I know his first slide introduces them. So Adrian, I will hand it over to you to do that.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, Simon, Fiona and team for greetings to you from this beautiful island, the Pacific of Niue. Talofa from my wife's country of beautiful Samoa, and kia ora to everyone. Thank you for having us today. My name is Adrian Heber. I am a Senior Advisor here in the Regional Partnerships team, and I'm joined by my colleague here today, Francina, who will be joining us and co-presenting our presentation. So I'm happy to kick off our presentation if that's cool, Stephanie. I'm just about to share my screen. Please bear with me, people, as we'll be working through our sharing screen this morning. Here we go. Okay, it won't allow me to, does it come up on your screen? It does, but unfortunately it's it's in a PDF file, so my apologies, everyone. This presentation will give us 10 minutes and then we'll talk about a little bit about our organisation, what funding opportunities are currently available, and then we'll open up the floor as well. Obviously, my name's Adrian and I'm joined by Francine, who's part of the Community Initiatives team who looks after our funding, and apologies from Velveta this morning, who's unavailable to attend, who looks after our Pacific Aotearoa community outreach and the work that we do in that space. Just quickly, the ministry is a Crown's principal advisor on policies and interventions aimed at improving outcomes for Pacific peoples by using our networks up and down the country. It gives us a really good understanding of knowledge and Pacific knowledge for allowing us to affect good culture in Pacific for our Pacific peoples. Our values are an anchor, each generation waving its foundation needs to stand on. Our vision is to ensure that our Pacific people are prosperous in Aotearoa. In 2018, we did a national engagement and we came up with the strategy called the Pacific Aotearoa Lalang Fall, which has 4 key priority areas, as you can see on here. What we find is a lot of our Pacific has 4 key priority areas. One is around thriving Pacific language, cultures, and identities. A prosperous Pacific community, resilient and healthy Pacific peoples, and confident, thriving, and resilient young people. This is really important to note, especially when we're applying for funding at the ministry. This is one of our key documents as well. So next, I'm just going to invite Francina just to talk about just some of the funding opportunities that we have, and I'll just pass it on to her. She's on screen.
Whakalofa atu ki tolu osi. Hi everyone, my name is Francina Ngataua. As Adrian introduced me. Sorry, Age, just can you, all I'm seeing is just the title screen.
Oh,
just the Ministry for Pacific People.
this one here.
Yeah.
Not that one.
Yeah.
Oh. So you can only see this one, eh?
Yeah.
What about that one?
Yeah, there we go. Cool, thank you. So I am, as we're working through our technical issues, I am part of our community initiatives team, and my key focus is specifically in funding, and it's around funding initiatives or community initiatives, as the title alludes to. Our most recent piece of work is the social enterprise under the Pacific Aotearoa Community Outreach Program. Sorry, Age, do you want me to go into what we've got available right now?
Let's just show this on there. Can you see that screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, team.
Awesome. So the Pacific Aotearoa Community Outreach Fund, we've had 3 iterations to date. The first one initially was, and the first 2 actually initially were as a response to COVID. So response and recovery to COVID. The third outreach fund that we had available and has just recently closed was the social enterprise. And again, just with regards to a view to have our organizations, our social enterprise orgs and businesses respond and recover from the impacts of COVID. So those are the three that we had. More so recently, or what we currently have available at the moment, is the second iteration of the Dawn Raids Fund. And that in itself is obviously quite specifically around the telling and the capturing of stories around the Dawn Raids incident, and then also specifically around capturing those stories and solidifying them in such a way so that those stories become part of our history that is available to those who obviously weren't around to experience it. I'll get you to flick on to the next one if you're cool. The Te Loa Community Outreach Funding is Te Loa's is specifically focused on STEAM and the participation of Pacific students within the STEAM areas. So that is science, technology, engineering, arts is a recent addition, and then of course maths. And so the fund is open at different points and has a range of branches available to it. Feel free to jump in, Age, if you've got anything further to add.
I think one of the key things around our Te Loa Fund is that any students who are interested in studying STEM, whether it's science, technology, engineering, arts, or mathematics, we do have different opportunities and a pipeline of opportunities from ECEs and ensuring kids do understand what are the process around some of that STEM work. We do have opportunities at intermediate and also high school. So we offer community initiatives and projects. We also offer scholarships. So for students who are getting to secondary school who will be studying any STEM subjects, and also university, the scholarships that are currently available. So we have that information you can find more on our website. I'll just do the community languages fund, Francina. So each year we have language week. So if you don't know, we have 9 official languages and we celebrate that each year. We have funding that is available for community groups to apply for funding, whether that's up to $5,000 or $50,000, to deliver initiatives around ensuring that our language thrives and survives here in Aotearoa. So one of those key projects, some of those key areas of interest is about raising the value of Pacific languages across Aotearoa. It's about strengthening the pathways and resources to ensure that our Pacific languages and learning in our Pacific languages, and it's about creating environments for the Pacific languages to be used more often and more frequent in different spaces as well. So those are only a couple of funding that is currently available here at the ministry. It's not only, but we have different funding that is open to our communities to apply for up and down the country. You can find out more information on our funding on our website, mpp.govt.nz, and you can just use the funding tab, which will be able to give you an understanding of what funds are currently open, what are some of the key areas that we're looking for closing dates as well. But just Francine, we can just tag team this bit. So I'll just put on the screen, if you can see that, around some helpful tips around our funding. I'll just add some of my 5 cents in, Fran. I'll just come to you before we go to open floor. I think one of the biggest things for our Pacific communities in terms of applying for funding is that to understand that there is a process when applying for funding. There's an application process, and part of the application process takes a bit of time just to read over the questions and answer those questions. And I think the unique thing about our Pacific peoples and what the ministry provides and supports is ensuring that our Pacific peoples understand that process, understand that, and in order to apply for funding, you need to be able to write really well, and write to the understanding the questions that is in front of them, whether that's a question that we might ask. So that's really, really important, and that's kind of a tip that I wanted to give to our communities as well. So making sure that we do write well to understand the criteria of the fund, and also referencing some of our key documents, which I raised earlier, just around Pacific Aotearoa 4 goals. There's 4 key priority areas as well. So, Fran, I'll come to you because I know this is your area of interest. Just some tips and tricks for our people who want to apply for funding here at the ministry.
Yeah, thank you, Age. I guess I can't really reiterate enough around the criteria of the fund, and I know it sounds simple, but please ensure that you answer every question. There is a reason, though it may sound like complete madness, but there is definitely method to why we're asking for specific pieces of information from you. Some of the other key things to ensure you're across is the end date or the expected completion date of the fund, and when you need to have your initiatives completed by. Please do pay particular attention to that and try to ensure that the program you've outlaid or the initiative that you've put together is achievable within the timeframes. There's also then, if you're successful in securing the funding, then there is the expectations around reporting, and we do have templates that will support you in reporting back around the progress and then therefore the completion or accountability at the end of your project. But it is just ensuring that you're across those and in a position to meet the expectations. And then one thing that I think we really want to challenge the view out there on is the concept of us as just funder. In essence, what we're hoping to do is partner with your organization. And so there is therefore an exchange of information, keeping us abreast of what's going on. If there's any challenges, if there's any amendments or changes, it's just ensuring that the communication lines are kept open. Cool, thank you.
I'm just going to take this one. Thank you, Francine. And just if any might just use it. Sorry, guys, for this. We'll be able to send this presentation out to everybody. But any questions that might come up, people might have. Let's go to question and answer time. Or maybe this question, friend, if you can help us. Will the Te Loa Fund consider projects to upskill older learners in STEAM subjects?
Yep, great question. Perhaps not specifically in the STEAM space, which is primarily our scholarships, but we are working to support, and we're trying to, in actual fact, we're trying to work out a space wherein we can cater to older learners or more mature learners, but it's still a work in progress. So we know there is a need out there. And so it is something that we're trying to partner with a few other agencies to get that in play. But it's a watch the space at the moment.
Thank you. So some other questions. Francina, you talked around wanting to develop a partnership. So are you happy to hear or have a phone call or meet with people who are looking to apply? And once they get funding, are you happy to meet to show so they can show you the benefits of your funding, what you've managed to achieve together?
Oh, definitely. That's absolutely what it is. We would, the idea to break down the barrier between funder and provider is one that we're pushing for. So if we're in a position to journey alongside our successful providers, then understand what it is that they're wanting to achieve, and then be in a position to cater to the need in our communities, 100%. We'd love to hear what our communities need, because that also then gives us or enables us to speak to the ones that give us the funding about the needs that are out there in our communities. It's more about less about what we think is needed, and absolutely more about what they know is needed on the ground, and us then being in a position to cater to that or support that.
Sounds great. And the processing time, so how long does it take from when the applications close to when people hear if they have been successful, and then when payment is made?
I'd be remiss if I said we were able to meet this, but we are aiming to have that all done within about a 6-week time frame, and that's because we've got the process of ensuring we've got all of the details from our applicants, and then we've got to have them assessed. We then have them moderated, and then the moderation extends to the point of decision and then notification. So ideally in about a 4 to 6 week time frame, but we're hoping to cut that down, because again, it's the sooner we can get the funding into the hands of our providers, the better.
Sounds good. So question, when does the 2023 Pacific Languages Fund open, please?
There's no specific date. I've just answered that, Stephanie. Just know from worrying. So there's no specific date. You just keep it online. Just keep it pressed online in terms of when it will be open. So it should be opening around March, April. So please just check out our mpp.govt website and also check out our social media channels as well. I've just got another question, Stephanie, just from Shaq. Does the Ministry for Pacific Peoples have funding allocated to Pacifica Rainbow LGBTQIA+ communities? Not specifically, but they are an interest group for the ministry, so it's definitely something that the funds are not limited, not to any specific, but it's open for them to apply. I hope that answers your question, Shaq, and you can find more of our funding that's online. I've got a question from Natalia. Will the Ministry Pacific Peoples can support charities that will not help, that help, not exclusively Pacific peoples? It is.
So there might be, to my understanding of that question is that the project might not be specifically for specific Pacific people, but they'd be included in it, but it's just not exclusive.
It's a case-by-case basis, in terms of the application and how it serves, Natalia. I've got a question here. I'll probably just take two more before we've got to about 2 minutes, so 2 minutes. I have a brilliant young Pacific employee. Is there funds available to apply to get funding to further his skills? What about Pacific disabled people? Also, yes, we do. We do have a program here at the ministry called the Tupu Aotearoa program, and it's a program to support young Pacific employees. Please check out our website for more information on what support is available. That's definitely something that I would recommend as well. It's Tupu Aotearoa. Another question, kia ora, how small can you fund if a small trust wants to educate Pacific language, culture and increase access for Pacific peoples? We have funding up to about 5,000 to 10, up to 50 and up to 100 as well. So yes, again, please check out our website. You can see the criteria of the fund. I've got a question from Julie. Will you support a project from a non-Pacific organisation if we are supplying free supportive care that is targeted at Pacific people? Absolutely. And the last question I have from Tina, kia ora, do you need to be Pacifica Heritage to apply for language funds? No, you don't, but as long as you're delivering for Pacific peoples in terms of that language content and meeting the criteria, that's something definitely we'll consider. There's no further questions. I've just put in, we'll send out our presentation, but that concludes our time, everyone. Just want to thank Simon, Stephanie and the team for having us. We'll send the presentation out. You can contact us on our website, mpp.govt.nz, or you can email us on fundhelp@mpp.govt.nz. I hope that helps. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Fiona and Simon. We appreciate you guys having us this morning.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Vincina. Great that you were both able to be here today. Can I suggest you might put those email addresses and website address into the chat? And yes, look forward to receiving your PowerPoint presentation so that we can then send it out to attendees. Thank you. My apologies for the technical issues we've experienced to date. We did practice, I assure you. We all came on 15 minutes early and did practice, but these things happen. So thank you for persevering with us. Our next speaker is Chloe Spedding from the Program Coordinator and Jackson Lacey from the Operations Coordinator from the Gift Collective. There they are. Welcome. Tell us more about the Gift Collective.
Kia ora, Morena, Stephanie. Gift Collective isn't a funder, we're a fund holder. So essentially, if you are an unincorporated entity, meaning you haven't set up as a charity or a charitable trust or an incorporated society or any other of those legal structures, we can support you to still apply for, receive and spend funding from funders like the ones that have been on this morning's hōtaka.
So we've got a presentation that we'll share with you as well.
Cool, brilliant. Everyone can see that. So essentially, yeah, this is a brief introduction to fund holding, and you know how fund holding works and all of that sort of stuff. And we partner with Open Collective as our software,
We use their software.
as our wonderful software provider, and we're just going to be explaining how all of this works.
We currently host 48 different collectives, and all of ours, we have a charitable focus. So anybody that wants to sit under our umbrella has to have charitable purpose.
Yeah. So fund holding, it's essentially a way of letting you make good things happen with funding without having to set up a bank account, do paperwork. We receive and spend the money on your behalf, and we handle all the paperwork, obviously, for a fee. You tell your funders to pay into our bank account, and you tell us who to pay out to. So essentially, we receive the money, hold on to it for you, then you tell us how you want to spend it. We listen to your instructions, and we support your kaupapa in doing that.
So there are different fiscal hosts out there. There are not just us. So there are other options. If you do have non-charitable work, we also, our friends over at OCNZ, Open Collective, they support non-charitable projects too. But us here at Gift Collective, we are doing charitable specific work.
Brilliant. And there are other organisations that do fund holding. We found that a lot of the time, if you're a larger organisation but still unincorporated, you want to use a specialist fiscal host, an organisation that this is all we do. That's what we found has been successful for a lot of organisations. As Chloe mentioned, we only handle projects that are legally charitable. That means they fit within the definition of charitable purpose as set out by Charity Services. But we're flexible in terms of, we obviously can't do anything that doesn't fit within those rules. But we are, if you've got a part of your project that isn't charitable, obviously we would just not hold funds for that project, for that part of the project.
So we do have particular collectives that have a business or something alongside it, or an incorporated society, but they have a charitable arm that they run through us. So that could be an option as well.
Yeah. We charge an 8% fee, but we're not registered for GST, so we don't collect and do returns and refunds for it. And the most important thing, if you're not just receiving funding from institutional funders, like some of the ones that have been speaking this morning, if you've got individuals or businesses that want to support your work, they can, through this platform, donate to you and receive tax credits for their donations. We've found that that's often a really big motivator for people wanting to support community projects and small community projects in particular.
Yeah, our platform has a crowdfunding portion to it as well. So you can do crowdfunding through it, but you can also receive donations from organisations, funders, individuals, a lot of it. And the good part about us, with all of our charitable due diligence that we're doing on all of that, that means for some of you smaller organisations that don't have charity status, with these funders that are asking that will only fund projects that are charitable by sitting under our umbrella, you are considered a charitable project, so you can get funded that way.
We use the Open Collective platform, as mentioned. It lets you receive funding and spend it transparently. So everything's listed online. It makes doing grant reports to funders a lot easier, because they can just log in and see what the funding, what exactly the funding has been spent on. And the most important part about the online platform is it's the way you get paid. So essentially the way the fund holding model works is you receive money into our bank account, and then in order to spend money on the work that you're doing, you can either submit invoices or submit reimbursements. If you've got external suppliers like a caterer or an AV provider or an event provider or whatever, and they send you invoices, you can have them send those invoices to us, and then we pay them straight from your balance. Alternatively, if you're doing work on an everyday basis, and you're doing individual reimbursements, if you're spending your own money for your charitable project, you can raise a reimbursement request through the platform, and we pay that out, and we pay those expenses and reimbursements weekly on Wednesdays. Oh, that's good. That's
That's
we're just one slide ahead of
We
ourselves.
are.
Yeah.
So what we do and what we don't do. We let you do your work your way. So we don't get in the way of the mahi that you're doing. That is up to you. What we're trying to do is make it easier for you to do that and do that more efficiently by helping you with some of the back end financial admin work instead. We do sign off on your grant applications. So because we are the bank account on that, we are the charity status on that. So we're the ones that do have that final sign off on a lot of the grant applications. We do account for the money that we hold for you. We let you buy stuff with your money.
That's
We don't. And we do actually legally own assets that you buy. But we've got a whole policy about that we can talk to you about if you do have any particular questions. And we let you pay your contractors to do your work.
So if you've got individuals, you know, the mahi of your project is something where individual people are doing, you know, work in the community. You can pay them for that work, for their hours as a contractor. At the moment, we don't do individual employment, actual employment of people.
We are exploring options.
But we are working on it. It's not a, you know, set in stone yet, but we are working on it. Do, and you acknowledge that in the terms and conditions that you will go through when you sign up. We don't write your grant applications for you, although I don't know if Huie are here this morning, but Huie is a really amazing, Huie Community Aotearoa is a really amazing group that can help with that. And we also don't account for any money you hold outside of our platform. So if you do have a business that is kind of aligned with your charitable project, if you do have an incorporated society, essentially a separate legal entity, we don't handle the money for that. We don't account for it. We don't handle the paperwork, but we do handle everything for money that's held within us.
So as a summary,
yeah,
we are a fiscal host that you could use for your project that will let you make good happen without the burden of too much financial admin. So hopefully we make the whole process easier for you, streamline it for you, and help you out with the charity status that you might need for some of your funding applications.
Wonderful. And these are, it's how to get in contact with Flo, because she owns it. I'm just here to help. Right, if we go to questions, yes. Question, do you take a percentage of the funds for your service? Yes, we do. We take an 8% cut of funds that come in, but that's a one-off fee essentially. So if you receive a $100,000 grant, we would take 8% of that, $8,000 as effectively the project overhead, the project admin fee, but then that's a one-off. You have the rest of that $92,000 to spend on the work of your project. We don't take a further fee from that. And quite a lot of the time, funders like this because it means that your financial overheads are transparent, and you can often just say, you know, add an extra 8% to your grant application to go, you know, these are my financial overheads. It's all going to be transparent. They know. A lot of the big funders know how we work. And another mention on fees, we do also take it. There is also a credit card fee if people give donations by credit card. Then our credit card processor, Stripe, takes a 2.6% fee, I think, it's somewhere around there. But then we just pass that on, but we don't take an extra fee on top of that. Question, Kia ora, how are you different from other fund holding services? What makes your service unique? I think it's because we're a kind of dedicated fund holding service, and we're also one of the few, you know, designated fund holding services that's a registered charity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're linked to the Gift Trust, which is a registered charity.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah, and we also, the one of the things that makes us different is I think we're the only registered charity in New Zealand that's using the Open Collective platform. Open Collective being the online platform that we use that allows collectives, as we call them, to raise and spend funds transparently. It's a really amazing online platform. The collectives we work with absolutely love it.
Really user friendly, it's easy to use. Yeah,
definitely. Question: what defines charitable? An incorporated society that acts as a social enterprise
Could we apply for help on the charity side, but not the side that adds profits to our collective? Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've
Yes.
got a number of groups that do that, that have, you know, an associated social enterprise or whatever, that do that. Definitely, that's something that we could do. Recently found out that orgs need to be incorporated. We all go work for a registered charity. Oh, that's interesting.
Jackson, I can answer that one. And as long as you have legal entity, you can apply to the Lion Foundation. You don't have to be an incorporated society. You can be a charitable trust. Tom, when he used to work at the Lion Foundation, who spoke at a previous funding fair, was very clear on that. You don't have to be an incorporated society specifically. As long as you have legal entity, you can apply to the Lion Foundation. But I'm assuming that if groups don't have either of those things, that they can then talk to the two of you.
Yes, that's exactly what I think the question is asking, because there are unincorporated registered charities. Yes, essentially, yes.
And yes, we can be used for one
Yeah.
particular project, one particular fund. We can be used as an interim service.
Yeah.
If you are a bigger organisation and you're trying to get charity status, but that takes a while and you've got a funder lined up now,
Yeah.
we can be that interim service for you.
Yeah.
We don't have to be everything
Yeah.
for you.
Question: why would you legally own your client's assets? Essentially, it's an accounting thing. Because we are the legal entity involved in the funding relationship with the funder, it's our money. So any assets that you own, that's, I think, any physical things over $1,000 in value, would still legally be owned by us. There are some circumstances in which that doesn't apply, but you would need to talk to us about that. Question: I understand that your job comes after the charitable trust gets funded, not before. Specifically for charitable trusts, Gift Collective isn't massively applicable, because if you're a charitable trust, you're already a legal entity, an incorporated entity, and probably if you're a charitable trust, a registered charity. So that's probably not as necessary in that case. But yes, our job comes in generally after a funding relationship has been set up, although quite a lot of the time collectives do set up on our platform in the hope of, and then they go, you know, apply for funding from a whole bunch of funders. Brilliant. What is the benefit of using a fund holder when funding agreements? Essentially, there are a lot of funders that require an incorporated fund holder, whether that fund holder is the charity itself that's doing the work, or a third party like us. Effectively, this is in order to comply with requirements from funders. But also, if you don't want to go through all the hassle of setting up your own legal entity, and as someone who's done it, yeah, it can be a bit of a hassle, or expensive bills from accountants. Yeah, there is a benefit. If you own the asset, does that mean you pay the depreciation on the asset? It's probably one for Bridget. That's probably one for our accountant. If this is something that you're interested in, and interested in owning assets that will be big enough to attract depreciation, please flick us an email, contact@giftcollective.nz, and we'll work into that one. Lion Foundation. I'm not familiar with Lion Foundation's exact rules, but if they require a legal entity, then we could do that. What happens to the assets if the org closes? We've got a procedure on that.
Sorry, Jackson, sorry to interrupt you, but people can't see the question, so you'll need to read the full question before you answer it, and you need to speak a bit closer to your microphones. When you turn your head to speak with Chloe, we can't hear what you're saying. So people can't see the question, so you need to ask the full question and then answer it. Thank you.
If an organisation uses your service and the funding is for assets, what happens to the assets if the organisation closes? We would have a conversation with both the organisation and the funder. Effectively, you know, have a conversation about what is needed to be done. If a funder requires that any, you know, for example, unspent funds need to be returned, then maybe we would need to sell those assets. But that would be a conversation to be had between all the parties. I don't think we've got anything.
I think that's all. So Thank you. I appreciate it's certainly a different way of getting funding and a different perspective that we were keen to share with people today. Is smaller groups that do not have legal entity yet. This is a way that they could explore to get some funding to get them started, to then look to become a legal entity down the track if they need to, or continue working with you. So thank you so much. I appreciate the two of you being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. Our next speaker is Gabriel, Secretary for the Lister Presbyterian Health Trust. Welcome, Gabriel. Glad you could join us today. Over to you.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me, and thanks to ANCAD for organising today's session and for all the other sessions that they provide and support for the community. I'll share my screen here. Okay, how's that looking? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so as I said, my name's Gabriel. I'm the Secretary of the Lister Presbyterian Health Trust. We're a fairly small trust that's based on the North Shore and Rodney district of Auckland. The purpose of our trust is to advance the physical and mental health and spiritual well-being of people. So that's the purpose of our trust. I'll just give you a brief history of our trust, as some of people may be familiar with the North Shore Presbyterian Hospital Trust. So back in 1963, the members of the Takapuna Presbyterian Church formed a trust. There was a hospital called the Lister Hospital in Anzac Avenue in Takapuna. And the Presbyterian Church were concerned that the hospital was going to be closed and turned into a motel, and that would be a significant loss for the community. So they banded together and bought the hospital and then ran it as a not-for-profit hospital for about 20 years. And then we fast forward to 1985, and with Shore City being built, there were concerns that the noise and parking and access from across the road would impact the hospital. So they ended up selling the hospital to Southern Cross for $1 million. So the trustees then invested that money and used the income from their investments to distribute that to worthy charitable causes on the North Shore and Rodney. And then in 2019, as the hospital was no longer running, the trustees decided to wind up the North Shore Presbyterian Hospital Trust and establish the Lister Presbyterian Health Trust to continue the work of the original trust. So that's just a little bit about the history. And as I said, some people may know about the North Shore Presbyterian Hospital Trust, which is actually being wound up. So a little bit about what we do. So our grant criteria, we accept applications from charitable organisations and also from individuals. So all applicants must be based in, reside in, or provide services to the North Shore or Rodney areas of Auckland. So that doesn't mean that if the organisation is based in Auckland City, but if they provide services to people on the North Shore, then we still accept applications from them. The trustees prefer to assist with specific projects, so that has a defined outcome rather than just day-to-day admin costs. So we do actually fund salaries, but it has to be for a specific purpose. So if the purpose of the salary can be defined, then we would consider that application. And as with all funders, of course, the ability to make grants, it depends on the funds available. So there's no guarantee that we will have the same amount of funds from each round to round. Let's move this out of the way. So I've just put a list here of some of the grants we've made in the past 2 years. So you'll see from the amounts there, we're a small funder. We don't make huge grants, but we do find that the grants that we can make does make an impact on organisations and individuals. So as I said, in the past 2 years, we've funded $8,000 for facilitator costs to run a program, $5,000 for spiritual carer or a chaplain salary, $4,000 for counselling sessions, and then down to $500 for resources for drop-in centres and group participants. So you'll see most of our grants are around about the $5,000 mark. We have made grants up to $10,000, but that's quite unusual. So that gives you an idea of the types of projects we would fund. So to apply for a grant from the Leicester Presbyterian Health Trust, you can download the application form from our website, which is listed there. The website also has a copy of our grant criteria as well. So the website has an application form for an organisation if you're applying, and also if you're an individual applying for a grant. And going back to what Adrian and Francina said, there is a process that you have to go through, and there are other documents that you need to provide when you do make an application. So please ensure that you provide all those documents that we ask. And if you don't send them in or submit them with your application, the application is just not accepted. We have 4 funding rounds every year. The closing dates are listed there. So the next one is the 7th of March, then the 7th of June, 7th of September and 7th of November. If you apply, for example, in the March funding round and for whatever reason you miss out, you are able to apply again for subsequent funding rounds, but you must submit a new application for each round. And all successful applicants are required to complete an accountability report. I can't stress enough about getting your accountability reports in time, because it may affect your future applications if we don't receive it from previous ones, which seems fairly straightforward, but it's amazing how often they're late and we have to chase them up. So, and that does have an impact on your future applications as well. So that's pretty much an overview of the Leicester Presbyterian Health Trust. Yeah, so I guess if anyone has any questions from here, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Gabrielle. So a couple of questions.
Yep.
Do you fund schools? So school counsellors that aren't covered by Ministry of Education funding, would you contribute to those on the North Shore?
Yes, we would. As long as the application covers off how that would benefit the physical and mental health or the spiritual well-being. So yes, so we do. We have funded teacher aides and we've funded counsellors in the past for schools as well. So yeah.
And you mentioned the 4 closing rounds, and that if you're unsuccessful in a round, you could apply in another round. If you were successful in a round, can you only apply once a year, or can you apply each time if you are successful?
We do have some organisations that apply every round, and so that's absolutely fine. Because as I said, sometimes we may not have as many funds available in one round, but further down the track in the year, there may be more or less funds available. So there's no restriction on how many times you can apply, whether you're successful or unsuccessful.
And how open are you and the trustees to hear from organisations prior to applying to say, hey, we're thinking of applying for this, what do you think? Or, yay, we've got money, would you like to come and see what you've helped us to achieve?
Yep. So we always welcome any questions before someone applies, because it's actually just a waste of time for people to apply if they're not going to, if they don't meet the criteria, or if we can help them frame their application a little clearer or a little bit better to align with our purpose, then so an email myself at secretary@listerphtrust.org.nz, and we're always more than happy to have a chat, particularly for organisations that haven't applied before, to have a chat and see if what they're applying for does fit our criteria and how to best frame that.
Sounds good. So other questions. Do you fund individuals' health care costs?
Yes, we do. In the past, we have. It is dependent on, there is quite a bit of information an individual would have to provide. It would have to provide some financial hardship, but we have in the past where there's been situations where a particular operation is needed for someone, and they don't have the capacity to fund that, then we have made grants to individuals for that.
And Rachel's asking, would you consider funding disabled business owners on the North Shore that are emotionally struggling from being disabled and a business owner, and how that impacts each part of the jigsaw?
Absolutely. So that would be an individual application, and so any individual can apply and go through the grant criteria, and the trustees would consider something like that.
Thank you. And Linda is asking, does spiritual include non-Christian faiths?
Absolutely. Yes, it's not just Christian, but all faiths, all forms of spirituality would be considered. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Gabrielle? Just a chance to quickly put it in the Q&A. Oh, here you go. Would a defibrillator for a sports club be considered?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we have funded them in the past for a couple of, I think 2 or 3 sports clubs. So yeah, that's the type of thing that we would consider. And of course, it's all based on how much funds we've got available and other applications at the time. So yeah.
You find of the 4 closing dates that there are some that are more popular than others? So you're saying potentially don't apply in March because it's really, really popular. In September or the other closing dates.
Yes, obviously March is always the most popular because everyone starts the year off with a whiz and a bang, and so there is quite a lot of, we do get quite a lot of applications then, but as you can apply a couple of times a year, there's no harm in applying for March and then again in September, where it's sometimes, or even sometimes June is a little quieter as well when everyone else is, some organisations are more focused on end of financial year, so June can be a little bit quieter at times. Yeah.
Wonderful. And Rachel's just asking for more examples of what you funded in the past would be really cool. I know you've given some in your PowerPoint, and obviously some of the questions have come up with other projects. Any other projects spring to mind? Mainly, most of them that list I'd done earlier were probably a good cross-section of what we've funded. Yeah. And last one, anonymous attendee, what about cultural and traditional cost? Does traditional more OPEX, do you mean, maybe, anonymous person? Or what about the cultural costs?
So for cultural costs, if it was an organisation that, a cultural organisation that needed funding for a cultural program, if it would meet the criteria of advancing physical or mental health or spiritual well-being, yes, by all means, the trustees would consider that type of application.
Perfect. Gabrielle, thank you. Sincerely appreciate you being with us today. And answering all those questions and giving us information about the trust, and I expect March might be even more busier.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie.
All good, thank you. Our next speaker is from Foundation North, a funder known to many of you, and Connie Lee is the engagement advisor, also a lovely person known to many of you. So welcome, Connie. Thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us all about Foundation North.
Well, I'm just going to share my screen. Stephanie, do you mind just give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation? Here we go.
All good.
And thank you so much, Stephanie and ANCAD, for hosting the event. It's always great to be able to present about Foundation North, but actually learn from the other presenters as well. Before I start, I just want to say kia kaha to all the communities and families affected by the flood and cyclone. It's not an easy time for everyone, so yeah. And thank you to organisations that are supporting those communities as well. Awesome. So who are we? So Foundation North, we are one of 12 community trusts around the country. Our main activity is to fund. So we are a strategic funder that funds towards 4 focus areas that I'll get into a little bit later. The areas that we look after is Northland and Auckland. So when I mean Auckland, we end our boundary sort of like towards the Tuakaha is where we end our boundary, and we fund all the way up to Cape Ringa. We've had quite a good year this year. It's been one of the years where we've had the biggest granting budget, and that's been a mix of our trustees acknowledging that we've had a bit of reserve built up and they wanted to basically get that out in the community, which has been really handy because we've been able to activate our rapid response fund to communities that provided emergency funding for the likes of COVID, more recently flooding, and at the moment supporting communities with emergency responses up the Northland due to the cyclone. What we are expecting is in the next financial year, which is April, the budget will be significantly lower, but it's not significantly lower that it's going to make any difference. It's that it's just going to go back to normal, which will be roughly around 45 to 50 million. I'm really proud that Foundation North is a values-driven organisation. Our core values are whakamana ako kia kato kia kotahi te hoi, me mahi I roto te tika te pono te me te aroha. We're a team of about 40 people within Foundation North. We do have advisors based up in Northland as well as South Auckland and some scattered around the country. I mentioned before, as a funder, we fund initiatives that align to 4 key focus areas: social inclusion, increased equity, community support, just realised I've got a typo, community support and regenerative environment. I'll get into them a little bit later. I've got a few slides which is quite detailed there. So let's talk about eligibility. So Foundation North, we don't fund individuals. So you must be an organisation or a collective that can demonstrate charitable purpose to apply. You must be operating for more than 12 months, and to evidence that, provide us with your annual accounts. Your project or your program must benefit the areas of Northland and Auckland. And so when I talk about organisations, it is those that have legal entities such as incorporated society, charitable trust. It could be a company with a charitable intent or with your link to charity services. And for the groups that are a collective that are not yet a legal entity or perhaps don't want to be a legal entity, you may still be eligible to apply. On our website, we've got a really useful guide that's called Umbrella Organisations that I would recommend you to have a look at. Basically, you'll need to find an organisation, perhaps like the Gift Trust, that can umbrella you and be your fund holder to access Foundation North funding. We only fund once a year, so if you've received a grant from us this year, you're probably only eligible for another grant next year. So once you've checked that you're eligible to apply, the next thing that I would recommend you to do is check our funding exclusion and limitation policy. I wouldn't want you guys to come into and apply for something that is on this list, and I know that a lot of people take a long time to put in applications. So please just double check that what you're applying for is not on this list. And just a heads up to new applicants and actually returning grantees that our funding policy is under review at the moment. We aim to get it signed off by April. So please do keep an eye out on our website for the most up-to-date information. I'm going to have a chat about 2 main grant schemes today. The first one being the quick response. These are for applications or requests up to $25,000. There is no closing dates, and we aim to give you a decision within 8 weeks of receiving a complete application. And I should mention that Foundation North, we are quite a broad funder, so we do fund things like operating costs, program costs, project costs, equipment. We have a limitation on uniforms for youth, but all those can be put into one application up to 25,000. In the background here, we've got Te Aupori Youth Trust based up in the far north, and they provide life-enhancing initiatives for rangatahi. And this group here is a grantee that aligns to our increased equity focus area. Next is our community grants scheme. This is for our larger applications. So any applications over 25,000 would be considered a community grant. There is again no closing dates. You can put in multi-year applications here, but I will say we are working on things in the quick response to allow multi-years in quick response at the moment. And we aim to give you a decision within 5 months of receiving a complete application. For community grants, if you're applying for under 99,999, you may receive a response a little bit sooner because we are trying to streamline our processes. And for any applications that are over that 99,000, it will need to go to board, and our board meets 6 times a year. You'll see that in both the slides that I've just talked about, I have highlighted in bold the word complete application. So that processing time starts from when we receive all the documents that are eligible and all the application that is complete, all the application form questions have been completed and submitted to us. We do have a dedicated team that does all the initial checking for us, and they will basically go back with you if they need any more information. If it's all good, they'll also send you a notification to say, hey, no more information is needed at this stage. It's going to be assessed now. Cool. And for our 4 focus areas. I will say that the next 4 slides is really detailed. Don't feel the need to scribble down a lot of notes. The slides or the presentation will be shared for you, and it's a good resource for any future funding applications to Foundation North. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the nuances between the different focus areas and perhaps the similarities as well. So like I mentioned, Foundation North, we fund initiatives that align to the 4 focus areas: increased equity, social inclusion, regenerative environment, and community support. And the terms here are quite broad, but I can tell you now that increased equity, social inclusion, regenerative environment, those 3 focuses, it's what we're looking for is quite specific, and it's intentional that we targeted those funds that way. So increased equity. The kaupapa of increased equity is to support approaches that achieve the aspiration of Māori and Pacific communities and address systemic intergenerational change in South Auckland and Northland. Initiatives that place young people and children at centre are our priority. So for this focus area, what's important for us is actually, across all 4 focus areas, you'll see a line that's called outcomes and then change pathways. The way I describe it is the outcomes is what we would like groups to evidence they are doing, but also the change pathway is the how. So the how is just as important as the what you're doing. Key themes that you'll see across the 4 focus areas is things like collective and collaborative models of working, that communities are leading their own solutions and changing the system. For this particular focus area, sharing power, tangata whenua, in decision making is one of the key things that we look for as well. So it is saying, hey, is the community, is the board and the your operational staff, are they reflective of the communities that you're intentionally reaching out to? And we can't ignore that language and culture is really important to thriving communities. Social inclusion. This focus area is for us to support approaches that reduce discrimination, racism, and increase social cohesion. So former refugees, new migrants, rainbow communities, and people living with disabilities are our priority here. Again, you'll see the themes of collaboration being a key thing of what we're wanting to see groups doing, prioritizing community voice and those of lived experience, advocating for change. So taking a more of a systems change approach to looking at social inclusion. Regenerative environment. Foundational, we've always had an environmental outcome. The key thing here that we've implemented or that we're changing is that initiatives that are proposed by tangata whenua will be our priority. And we acknowledge that there is a lot of awesome environmental work out there. And what we're also acknowledging is mātauranga Māori is also a key part in this focus area. And we want to understand each group's journey on implementing mātauranga Māori, acknowledging that not all groups are experts, they will be on their journey, and how can we support that happen? And lastly, there are so many important things that Foundational would like to consider, but may not be so specific to the other 3 focus areas. So therefore, there is a focus area called community support to support participation in positive activities and improve community wellbeing. Again, similar themes: community resilience, community-led decision-making, collective and collaborative effort. And I'll say here now that it's not to say this bucket is less important than the other buckets, which is totally not true. It's just how we've tried to be more strategic with our funding and more targeted to our priority communities. Another thing that I'll just mention is that whilst Foundational's focus area, it does seem like they're in 4 distinct boxes. It's very natural for initiatives or community groups to be like, oh, actually, I feel like I fit in 1 or 2. That's awesome, because that in reality, that is how community works. My suggestion is pick the one that you can evidence that you align strongest to, and then perhaps use some of these keywords in these theory of change to acknowledge that you're actually aligning some of the other focus areas as well. So, I guess I'll give you guys some application tips. The first one is to understand the funder's strategic goals. So all funders will have their own strategic goals. Some of them may be similar, some of them may be quite different. Take your time to understand it, understand where there is a natural fit between your initiative, your organisation, and what the funders would like to see. Secondly is who, when, what, how, and why. Our assessors, they assess over 800 applications a year. So it is useful if you can answer the questions and be concise with your answers. They will always go and have a look at your Facebook, look at your website, look at or do a Google of you guys to find about who you guys are, what the initiative's about. So don't be afraid to use the application and hone in and be specific about what you want funding for. Literally, what you want funding for. Is it operating costs? Is it program costs? So we would love for you to also provide context. So at the moment, we know there's a lot of changes within government and their strategic goals. So if you are looking to Foundational for a significant increase in funding, you can be honest and tell us that actually we used to get funding from a government agency. Their strategic goals have now shifted. We're not eligible, but the mahi still continues. That's awesome. Tell us that. Linked to the second point is to answer the questions. We do have helper texts in the application forms that really help you guide you to answer the questions. In a way, I would say the first 2 sentences should literally be quite straightforward on what your, who's going to benefit or what's the outcome you guys want to achieve, and then take your time to elaborate. Most application forms are designed in a way to draw out your story. So don't feel the need to answer your whole story in the what you want funding for. Take your time and give us that in-depth detail that we love. In saying that, we do have a word limit, so be concise. Supporting document and information that is easily understood and coherent to the application. So double check that the amount that you're asking for or the program that you're asking for, the names are the same. So if you're providing us with a program plan, that they match what you've said in the application form. We do have a budget template on our website. You may find that useful to use. The amount that you apply for needs to match the amount that you said in your application form. And I guess be realistic, and it's not to say, please don't apply for what you need, but have a think about if you're putting all your eggs into one basket. So what if Foundationals are unable to fund your initiative fully? At the end of the day, Foundationals, we are a contestable funder. The other thing about being realistic is, have you allowed enough time between applying for your grant, waiting for a decision, to when you want to start your initiative? Don't leave it so close that you're refreshing the page every 5 minutes, wondering about the funding outcome to start your initiative. Plan early so you know what resource you have to start your initiative. And lastly, our team is here to work with you and support you. The photo here is our lovely Bryn. She's part of our funding support team and one of the first point of calls. If there's a lot of information that you don't understand or you have a specific question, just give us a call and we're more than happy to help. If you don't want to call us and you want to have a quick read of everything that Foundation North does, our website is full of information. We've got application guides from the get-go about your eligibility, about applying for fund, even information about how to use our funding hub. So that's a rich source of resources for you to use if you don't want to give us a call and you just want to explore, and that's totally cool as well. Cool. I've just provided our website on this page, our general information email, and the 0800 line where you can reach us. And yeah, that's me. Thank you and kia ora.
Thanks, Connie. That's fantastic. There are numerous questions for you. So, number one, the Foundation North will not generally fund fundraising organisations. Can you please clarify what is considered a fundraising organisation according to Foundation North?
Yeah, so I think it's more shifted towards fundraising activities. So fundraising organisations would be the ones that we look at your constitution and we see that actually fundraising is a core part of what you guys do. I can't think of any big fundraisers. I know there are, but there are always a little bit of nuances that we can take. So if you are a fundraiser, if your core goal is to fundraise, it's a problem exclusion. But if you have an activity that is probably not to do with the fundraising aspect, we might be able to consider it. So it might be worth giving us a call to explore that, because I know that we have considered a couple of fundraisers recently.
So my understanding is that Foundation North normally don't fund fundraisers or fundraising expenses or costs, but you will fund someone to do like a part of capacity building, to put together like a fundraising and comms plan to help an organisation to grow and develop.
Yeah, that's something we can consider. So we wouldn't, let's say Give a Little. We wouldn't fund Give a Little, and because they're a crowdfunding platform. But if you're a fundraising agency and there is specific projects or initiatives that you are working on that is building capacity, that is something we can consider.
Great, thank you. From anonymous attendee, if an organisation is applying for the first time for a grant, do you recommend applying for less than 100,000 and a single year, or can we apply for the first time for a multi-year grant? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're a first time to Foundation North, then I would recommend you building a track record with us. Probably not a multi-year, probably a single year application first, so we get to know you guys, what you guys do, and then go from there. I don't have an amount that it's pretty hard without any information to guide you with an amount to apply for, but apply for an amount that's realistic and the amount that you're eligible for, and that kind of relates to the size of your organisation as well as the services that you are providing. I'm happy to have a chat with you if you want me to have a look to give you a bit of guidance on that one. Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks, Connie. Steve's asking, as a community and social enterprise, we do not have charitable status. However, we have a constitution with a charitable purpose. Would we be eligible to apply now? In the future, we will be a separate charitable trust.
Yeah, so if you're a company, although you don't have a charitable purpose, if you've got a constitution that states that you've got a charitable purpose, you would be eligible to apply. We would want to know a little bit more about how your company runs, and actually what is obviously your charitable purpose needs to align to our focus areas. So that part would be eligible for us to, or you'll be eligible to apply right now. Yeah.
Juliet's asking, what is your attitude to funding support for volunteers?
You mean if it's towards volunteer costs? Absolutely. Another thing to recognise is that if you are perhaps consulting or working with local iwi or local people to get their cultural intelligence or competency, that's something that we would expect people to be compensated properly. So by a koha, that is absolutely something that we consider. Yeah.
Thank you. Rachel's inquiring, Māori and Pacific priority is awesome. Where does disability fit into that? Disabled Māori and Pacific are the most vulnerable and under-supported, and biggest numbers, being 1 in 4 Kiwis disabled, yet was last priority. Is the list prioritised that way, or that sits there on list randomly? Thank you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the 4 distinct focus areas, the kind of limitation of that is that, you know, you get those intersect communities like Māori Pacific that are also identified as disabled people. They are our priority, so we're not saying that just because you're not intersecting, you're not priority. So my suggestion would be, hey, if you're a kaupapa Māori organisation, apply under Increase Equity, but actually tell your story about you guys are working with disabled community. So absolutely, they are a priority and they're not at the bottom of the list.
Thank you. Pippa's saying, regarding multi-year grants, for applying for 90,000 per year for 3 years, does that still go to the board as the total would be over the 100K?
Correct. So we look at the total amount that you're requesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Richard, hi Connie. On your application forms, are you able to please indicate word limits for each question? This can only be found after entering the text. Thank you.
Yes, great feedback. Let me write that note and I'll bring it back to our team that does all the zhuzhing up with the form.
Thank you. I'm sure there's many that would love that. Thanks, Richard, for bringing that to Connie's attention. Anonymous attendee, would you support conferences aimed at Indigenous health and wellbeing?
And so in general, the supporting the preparation of conferences is an exclusion, but if it's for our priority communities like Māori Pacific, then it's something that we may consider. Like I said, there's a lot of nuances that Foundation North can work within. It is worth actually having a chat to us, exploring if that's a possibility. Yeah.
Question from Ruth. If you're a charity that have been doing work for a number of years without funding and have no evidence of accounts or no bank accounts, what would you need as evidence for an application?
Oh, that's a tricky one because you know, I would be wanting to explore how you guys have been operating. Is it on a purely volunteer level as an unpaid charity? Are you guys registered as a charity? Because we know that if you're an incorporated society or with charity services, you are required to upload your statements of service performance, financial accounts every year. So I would think that it's pretty tricky. We will need those evidence in order for you to be eligible to apply.
Most funders would, unfortunately, Ruth. So if you've been doing some work for a number of years, obviously what you're doing is really important and it's needed. Suggest it's time to maybe open a bank account and look at getting some financials, financial reporting. Jackie, in the past, if you're applying for more than 50,000, your organisation needed to have audited accounts. Is this still the same, or has it increased to 100,000?
So we basically go by your constitution now. So whatever your constitution states, then you'll need to apply for it, and that's what we'll go with. Yeah.
Anonymous, do you need audited report of accounts if we are Tier 3 or Tier 4 charity organisation after the project is over?
For accountability, we don't need your accounts at the end. We will be sending you an impact report for you to fill out, which you need to complete within the year.
Would Foundation North fund Māori Trust for running specific cultural meetings of whānanga to build the capability and capacity of their members, as well as the restoration of traditional carvings and the story of those carvings?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is something we would definitely consider.
Great. There's still some more. So Connie, you're very popular. Rachel, thank you for clarity. Part 2. Is disability education and a cultural competency recognised as part of cultural competency as a funded part of work?
It's that disability education. Sorry, Rachel, I'm not quite understanding the question. Is it advocacy, where you mentioned disability education and cultural competency, and is it advocating for specifically Māori Pacific disability people? If that's what you mean, that advocacy is part of what we would consider and fund if you are out there as an organisation supporting other organisations to understand the likes of Pacific Māori disabled people and how to fully support them in a holistic way, then yes, that's something we would really look for when we're reading the application as it comes in.
Mm-hmm. Anonymous, do you support or fund individuals? I think you said no to that earlier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you give grants for cultural events which help educate younger generation about a particular culture and tradition, as well as not lose the values?
Absolutely. So a lot of cultural groups do come to us for events. Could be like the Chinese New Year events that we fund. Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Juliet's asking if you consider funding for vehicles.
Not for general vehicles. There might be an exception made for disability vehicles, but it needs to be part of a bigger project, we would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Joanna's asking if you fund suicide prevention app for rangatahi and supporting Te Reo Māori.
So is that an app development project?
Or maybe it's app for application. Would you fund a solution? I don't know. I'm just realizing that as I read it, isn't it a suicide prevention app or a suicide prevention application to you? So not 100% sure on that one.
Both of them would be yes. I think like I mentioned, how you're working with the rangatahi, what is your best practice around working with vulnerable youth? It's all will be taken into consideration, but that would be our priority area. Yeah. Okay.
And Stelly's asking, regarding applying once a year, if we have received a quick response grant, but finding our mahi has expanded into quite a different area, is there a possibility of an exception allowing us to apply again for project support?
Probably not. It might, if you're asking if you guys can apply again for more, then perhaps we can consider a change of purpose. So if your original grant isn't quite what we granted you isn't quite what the outcomes are currently or how the program is going, then perhaps come chat to us for a change of purpose so you can fully use the grants that we've provided to you for the program as it is now. Yeah.
Okay, last one from Natalia. If you're an organisation that provides the financial support for kids in need to access training opportunities, but you don't provide the training services yourself, would that be considered by Foundation North?
Okay, right.
So maybe they outsource it?
I guess my question is, would we work with the organisation that you outsource directly? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Connie, that was great. I appreciate your presentation and for asking all the questions. That just proves how popular you are and how grateful everyone is for the funding support that Foundation North provide. Back to Simon for a couple of polls for all our attendees. It's now your turn to participate a bit more. Simon, a couple of polls.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. Here we go, folks. So poll number 2 coming up. How important is income from trusts and grants for your organisation?
Yeah, 100%.
We're getting there. We'll have a countdown, everyone. So 4 and 3, 2 and 1. And we'll go ahead and end the poll there. Here we go. I'll see the results.
Yeah, so for many of you, it's your main source of income, hence you all being here today. I can only say that I appreciate it's your main source of income, but it's sometimes really useful to have more than one source of income. So to look to diversify when you possibly can. Simon, poll number 2. Oh, sorry, 3.
Poll number 3. Here we go, folks. Launching that one now. Are you planning to attend any other training opportunities this year? And for those that may not be familiar with what we do and provide, We have a lift.nz website, that's liift.nz, which you can go to at any stage just to see the sorts of training that we put out there throughout the year. All right, I'll count down 3 and 2 and 1, and I'll get in that poll. Sharing results now.
Great to see that so many of you are considering attending another ANCAD training opportunity. As Simon said, there are some great opportunities available at little or no cost. So please head to the LIFT website for more information. Thanks, Simon. Okay, our last speaker for today is from the Department of Internal Affairs. George is known to many in his role as a community advisor. George, welcome.
Welcome. And I'll just share my screen here.
Perfect, thank you.
Tēnā koutou ko hikurangi te maunga Waiaputawa Ngāti Porou te iwi, George Tuhura taku ingoa. My name is George Tuhura. I'm a community advisor for Hapai Hapori, Community Operations, which is a business unit of the Department of Internal Affairs. So what we're responsible for is for delivering community advisory and funding administration services throughout the whole of New Zealand, and supporting communities to be resilient and achieve their aspirations. We have a number of different offices which are located across New Zealand. For our particular office, and the one that be focusing on providing an overview this morning is for the Auckland region, Tāmaki Makaurau. So we pretty much, that covers the from about Tuako right up to Te Hana. So just a bit of a thing, as I alluded to in my beginning, we provide advisory services and that to the community, but also a big part of our role is supporting distribution committees in regards to allocating out monies or grants to the communities. So we have 3 different sources of grants. There's Crown grants. One of the ones that a lot of you will be familiar with is COGS grants, which is Community Organisation Grant Schemes funding. This is a localised grant which is delivered right across New Zealand. There's also lotteries grants, and one of the most familiar ones that our officers up here in Auckland are involved with Lottery Community. There are also a number of other grants we have as well too, and also trusts is another source of grants as well too for the community itself. What I've provided down there is just our website there, and if you go on there to their website, it actually gives all the information relating to our particular grants and the requirements and everything like that. So I'd strongly recommend that there. There'll be a number of, I've heard the discussions that have taken part today, and there's a whole number of different areas which those will cover. But for today, the 2 main areas that I'm going to be focusing on is Lottery Community grants and also COGS grants. So Lottery Community grants, these are available for non-profit groups and with a community or social services focus for ongoing operational costs or projects which help people improve the quality of their lives in the communities. So lotteries, community grants can be used for operating, ongoing operating costs, projects beyond your organisation's day-to-day operations, helping to top up an organisation's existing funding, and minor capital works, which has a total project cost of $50,000 or less. Anything that's over that amount there is considered by, we have a Lottery Community Facilities Fund. So how we work is we have advisors that are specific to each of these committees, and we can actually link you up with those particular advisors to get some in-depth advice which is relevant to that particular committee and that fund itself. So as I alluded to, what we have here in New Zealand is we have 11 regional lottery community committees, of which Tāmaki Makaurau is one. And we also have a national community committee. Now with the national community committee, it's very common for groups that are based here in Auckland to also provide services which benefit not just Auckland, but other regions. If that is the case, if it benefits 2 or more of those regions, then those requests go to the national committee. There's also, if it has a national focus, you can be in practice when you're delivering your services, you may in some instances have a focus on Auckland, but there also may be projects where there's a national focus. If that's the case, then that will go to our national committee. Okay, in terms of lottery community funding, what we're looking at there is the community committees. They look at the outcomes of your project or services and how they will benefit your community and help support volunteers, help people to help themselves, promote community wellbeing, promote community or cultural identity, support vulnerable people, help people to feel that they belong and they take part in their community. Now, you see that's quite very wide there. So each lottery committee, what they'll have is they determine the outcomes and priorities that wants to achieve in their particular area. Now the priorities. Now what fund? So what you're looking at here with the lottery community, they fund organisations that support the needs of Māori, whānau, hapu and iwi, Pacific people and ethnic communities, very wide, older people, women, youth, people with disabilities. And also this fund here, lottery community has, what they look at is projects and activities, resources or services that focus on parents, families, children and youth, enhancing the quality of life of older people, preventing violence, new migrants and refugees, people with long-term disabilities or illnesses, people who are considered to be at risk, improving people's knowledge and the use of digital technology. So for each of the distribution committees, they will have, because of this wide range of different people that may be considered for funding, organisations for funding, they also will set their priorities for each of the areas in that, because it's very common, as with a number of other funders that have already been mentioned and have given their presentations, where the amount that's been requested and at one given funding meeting far exceed the amount of money which is available. So here's a bit of a link down there to you to be able to have a look at the different priorities in each area. But what I've put out over here is just an example of this is for our Auckland region. So currently at the moment, these are the priorities that sit with our committees. So Māori communities, Pacifica communities, local groups that have that are strengthened to deliver community-led solutions to provide welfare and resilience of diverse local communities, but a lower priority will be given to organisations that are receiving government funding and are unable to demonstrate community need and benefits which are over and above their contracts. As a lot of my colleagues have already alluded to, there's a need for these sort of things to occur because of the amount of money that people at any one given time, have applied to the committees to consider in relation to the money that's available. So they have to go through these priorities and have a look at these. So some of the supporting information, very similar to a number of the other funders, having a budget, financial accounts, not more than 18 months old at the closing date. And with the lottery community, because you can get funding for minor capital works, just providing a couple of quotes. And like a number of others have already indicated, it's about making sure that that it's complete. So if it's incomplete, you don't provide all the given information by the closing date, then it'll be considered as incomplete and not considered for funding. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. Now, the next funding dates. Our financial year actually runs from July through to June each year. So at the moment, we're going through the process of actually confirming what the opening and closing dates are going to be. And we also have a decision by date as well too. But at the moment, the next funding round for us is going to be in June and it'll close in July. And then the decision by date will be in October, just to give you an example. And we have 2 for lottery community each year. And the second one opens and closes in November. And the decision date is around about March of the following year. I've given you just a link there because on our website, that'll give you the information that you need. And very soon that's going to be confirmed, and then that'll go live on our website, those dates. Now, the next form of funding that's very common and what we're involved with in our region is COGS funding, or community organisation grant schemes. These are grants for non-profit organisations delivering community-based social services that contribute to achieving locally determined outcomes. So these grants, they can be used for running or operational costs, community development costs, community projects, or event costs, which encourage participation in the community, promote community leadership, and promote social or economic and cultural equity. Here in New Zealand, we have 37 different distribution committees, which is scattered across New Zealand. In the Auckland region alone, we have 6, Rodney, North Shore, Waitaki City, Auckland City, Manukau City, Papakura Franklin, and Great Barrier. And by the way, we've probably got some of the biggest, we have the biggest committees in New Zealand, and that'll be indicative of the large population that Auckland itself actually has there. Now, how it operates here with COGS, we have what's known as a national COGS committee. And from there, they provide the governance and the direction to all the different distribution committees, local distribution committees that exist in New Zealand. So again, looking with the COGS funding, organisations requesting COGS grant need to show how the community-based services or projects will contribute to encouraging participation in communities, promoting community leadership, developing community capacity, promoting social, economic, and cultural equity, and reducing the downstream social and economic costs to communities and the government. You probably can pick up a lot of the emphasis on a lot of our funding is around outcomes, which is a very important focus of our work. It's looking at the things like the impacts, the benefits, which arise from an investment of grant income into organisations that deliver these services to the community. Okay, now our national priorities here for COGS here. There's Māori, women, Pacifica, very wide ranging number of priorities here, ethnic communities, older people, rurally isolated people, people with disabilities, families, youth and children, unemployed, community-based organisations with limited access. So each of our local distribution committees, they develop community outcomes that they see as having a priority from consultation with the public. And again, the reason for doing this here is around, it's very, very common to the number of the amount of requests, the total amount of requests that have been put to these committees far exceed the amount of money which is available. Now, the two differences between the two funds, with the lottery community, it's that I've mentioned, it's regionally based, whereas with COGS funding, it's locally based. Again, looking at the supporting documentation, very similar to lottery community. The budget, financial accounts not more than 18 months old at the closing date. And again, just a reminder, your grant request will need to be considered as incomplete if you don't provide this information by the closing date for funding round, and will not be considered for funding. Now, one of the things, the differences you would have looked at is that they don't provide funding for capital works. Now, one of the reasons around there is, on average, with the COGS grants, they're usually about, their smaller grants, $2,500 to about $3,000. As with lottery community, they're larger grants there. And normally, what happens if you're a group that's just starting out, and normally smaller groups will come to COGS funding just to get themselves started up and running. And then once they're getting up and running, if they're looking for the larger grants, they'll then proceed on to lottery community. And saying that, also, groups can also apply for both funds in the annual budget as well. That's very common for people to do that. Okay, the next funding rounds there, again, the up and coming Pacific dates for that, that's to be signed off at the moment. But please go to our website there, bookmark that there, and that's got the funding dates. But usually it will open about April and it will close in May, with the decision by dates in July. Now, just a few top tips for groups seeking funding. A lot of them have actually been mentioned by my colleagues that have given their presentation so far. Understand, have a clear purpose for seeking funding. You understand what your organisation does, your priorities, be clear about your outcomes, and also search for your right funders for you. Understand their priorities and what they fund. Okay, now the other tip is find funders that fit. Now this point has been raised already, that actually fit your particular project. A lot of times groups will try and make their projects fit into a funder's criteria, where the best course of action will probably be to look at another funder that it'll be more similar in terms and aligns to what the organisation is after and their purposes. Okay, the communication throughout your organisation is another tip there. Yeah, just making sure, you know, everyone throughout your organisation is well aware of it. A lot of the people that are involved with putting together your funding applications will be working on the day-to-day management side of things, whereas it's very important that you have that communication from your governance committee, your board, right through, and getting them to prove that. And also that key people in your organisations that have the different type of information that you need are well aware of it, so you can put your information in there together for your application. Give yourself enough time to apply. We always advise every year is for groups to, if you've got the opening dates, don't leave it to the last moment to put in your request. It's always a good idea to put them in advance. We have a grants online system where you can put a draft in there, contact us and ask us to go through and have a little bit of a check on that if you wish. And also, the other thing, if there's any information that's actually needed, the correct information. That gives you enough time to be able to provide it by the closing date. So that's another tip just to give everyone. And also, a good application is a clear, complete, and aligns with your funding criteria. A very important, look, putting it down there, being clear and concise about what you're after, and address the questions that are in your applications here. So what you want the funding for. Something as simple as operational costs is great, because we also have other questions that you can expand on that, which is afterwards. So how, what is your need, and also how you're going to address that need, what are your outcomes in that. So just, and again, don't be afraid to contact us and go through that and just seek some assistance with that there if you wish to. Right. Right. Okay, again, this has been stressed by my colleagues. Just look at a realistic amount when you're applying there. And also, if you've got larger projects, it's really good, especially in terms of your budget, putting down the different types of funders and that that are going to assist in this process. So and that's a good way of looking at that and coming up with realistic amounts rather than just coming to the one funder, where chances are you'll be applying for a larger amount. The other thing is also to understand your financial positions and also performance might look like to your funder. So be able to explain any deficits or unusual expenses, etc. Because there's a whole lot of different factors that are taken into account when we're looking at applications, which also include your financials. Realistic expectations, again, very important there. The other thing there is there are times when applications are declined. Make sure that you understand the reasons for that. Contact us and ask us to clarify that there. So when you consider of making another application, then you can come back and get some clear feedback about that, eh?
We're just about out of time there, George.
Okay.
Perfect.
There's some contact details for us. Ka pai?
Thank you. That was fantastic. Appreciate all the tips there. There are a number of questions for you. So we are a new trust and do not have a year's worth of accounts. Can we still apply?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you can do is, as long as we've got some requirements around your financial systems, you've got to be able to have a bank account there. And also you've got to have 2 signatories that's available for that. So a bank account is probably with a small and a new organisation, that'll be your bottom line. We're well aware we have also requirements with our financial information where you're less than 12 months old, 18 months old, and that is one of the ones there. Now that information there, the person that's asking their question, please go onto our website. We also have access there to that financial information, which will give you all the information that will answer that question there.
Great, thanks, George. So for COGS, if your organisation works across multiple communities in the Auckland region, can you apply to all of the COGS committees or just one?
You can apply to all those COGS committees right across the Auckland region. My advice in that situation is when you're working out your budget, you work it out in terms of the proportion of the costs, because generally when you're looking at, when you're working across the region, you'll firstly have a regional type figure, and also you may also break that down into cost per area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that is the case there, it's about looking at the proportion that you would wanting to apply to each of those specific committees. The advice I always give groups is keep an eye, and also I'll keep a record of the data of people that are benefiting from your services in each of the areas, and that'll give you sort of an idea and proportion on which amount of money you'll be looking to apply to each of the particular distribution committees here in Auckland.
Thank you. No, you want accounts that are no more than 18 months old when you apply. But if you haven't been operating for 12 months or more, can you still apply with the accounts that you an interim report, say maybe a 6-month report?
Yes, you can do that as long as it's this is very similar to the last question. You can have a bank account. I answered that one. This one here, just provide us with an income and expenditure statement no older than 3 months old at the time when you apply.
Okay.
Just that for that person that answered that question, please, I'd always stress this, is just go to our website, bookmark it, everyone, and then that information is there as a reminder.
So if you submit your application and maybe the budget isn't quite giving the information that you require as an assessor, or there's something missing, will you come back to the applicant to give them a chance to put in what you need, obviously before the closing date?
Yes, we do. And that's why I've stressed the point about making sure that when you got the opening date, put it in the early, please. Then that way that we can actually work with you. You can get advice from our community advisors there. They can ring you up if you're a bit uncertain about the requirements that we have on the website. We also do have, like Connie mentioned, about having budget templates that can be used, especially for groups that are new to funding and may be unfamiliar about setting up a budget. That can help you, and we can go through and help you with that there as well, show you how that works.
And so you're happy to receive phone calls from people before applying or with questions? We always try and encourage that, but please, if you can, make sure don't leave it to the last moment, because what happens, we get an influx at that time. And I think a lot of our funders, they're very familiar with that. I've heard some of my colleagues mention that, but the reason why we do that, we encourage that contact. It's very important to relationships. It's not just about funding, but more importantly, establishing relationships with people to have an understanding on their needs. But at the same time, it's being realistic with those time frames and allowing us an opportunity to be able to communicate with them. And the maximum amounts that you can apply for, if there are any, for lottery grants or COGS?
Okay, now with the maximum amount for organisations that do not have a legal entity, they can apply up to $10,000. Anything, if they do have a legal entity, they can apply for over $10,000. We do not have the restrictions on the amount that you can apply for, but it's been about realistic. I did mention with lottery, with the COGS, in general, what happens is on average, groups will look at about 2,500 to 3,000. Now, those you can actually go onto our website and it will give you an indication on the levels of grants that are given out, because each year what we do is we publish the grants that are made both by the COGS committees and also the lottery community committees. That gives you a good indication of it. And it's good, just go and have a look at a similar organisation to yours and have a look and compare it. And a lot of the times they might be newer ones which you may be aware of. And so that's sort of looking at about the level you'll be looking at.
Okay, we're fast running out of time and there's lots of questions for you. Johnny, the answer to your question, yes, you can apply to lottery and COGS in the same year with different projects. Juliet, you're asking if unsuccessful with lottery national, can you scale it back to one region and apply again to that specific lottery community in the following round? I'm going to say yes, and you're nodding, yes. George, so yeah, we can say yes to that one.
As long as it's regionally focused, they're fine.
Denise is asking for a map showing each COGS boundary to be available. Currently, there's only a description, and if you're unfamiliar with the area, it can be hard to follow. Is a map available?
No, there's something that's been worked on. That's one that's come up a lot.
Linda's inquiring where the source of COGS funding comes from. That's just a government allocation, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, it comes from the Crown.
Yes. and as opposed to lotteries, which obviously come from the profit from lotto. Can we apply for multiple initiatives or purposes on the single application, or do we need to do multiple application?
What you do is put them all into the one application. You can apply for those purposes. So if you apply for and put in more than one application, we put a priority on the first one that's been made. My advice, put them all in there in the one application.
Thanks, George. Anonymous, is there opportunity for seed funding or pilot funding through COGS or lotteries?
That's one of the points I raised there. A lot of the time, smaller groups, when they're first starting up, and that's what COGS, with COGS funding, that was originally what it was all about, seeding little grants to start up your locally community-based groups. And I would advise to go to COGS in the first instance.
Thank you. Are there is there advisors available to assist community groups with the fund application and support an application review? Like, would you see applications? Would you be happy to see a draft application and give feedback?
Okay, I did cover that point. Yes, we can give feedback on it as long as they get it through to us within a realistic time frame.
Okay, thank you, George. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today and your knowledge and taking the time to answer the vast majority of questions. My apologies, there were a couple we didn't quite get to, but we are out of time. So as we come to the end of today's funding fair, I'd like to ask Fiona Brennan from ANCAD to say a few words.
Thank you to all our wonderful speakers. You've all shared so much useful information with us this morning. I think the things that have been emphasised generally have been making sure that we are aligned with the applications, that our priorities are aligned with the priorities of the funder, having that good communication with the funder and providing them with all the information that they need. It's been fascinating to hear more about the source of the funding streams that you've talked about and the funding organisations. And I think that's given us all such a great context for working with you all in the future. What's really come across strongly to me is just the vast amount of support and willingness for organisations to succeed in their funding applications. And I want to thank all our funders this morning for the amazing work that you do. And I, obviously acknowledge our funders, Lotteries and Foundation North, but all of our funders here today for all of the amazing work that they do and the support that they provide for our communities. Thank you to Simon and Stephanie, our training and capability lead, and for Simon and for Stephanie Maitland of Maitland and Associates for organising and coordinating this event. It's been fantastic to have you all here with us and participating in our polls and the amazing questions that you've all come up with this morning. I think that's all helped our understanding too. And please do explore our ANCAD resources on our website, ancad.org.nz, our Lift Aotearoa training programme, our funding guide, and other services that we provide. A huge thank you to you all who attended this morning. Stay safe, ki kaha, and haere mai. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. I also would like to thank all our speakers and to you all for attending. I hope you found it worthwhile and your grant income increases as a result. Our next funding fair is on Wednesday, the 2nd of August, and we're hopeful to have a gaming machine trust and a representative from the Tyndall Foundation as speakers at that one, as well as others. Always interested to hear of other funders you'd like to hear from. Please just let us know. Just a reminder that the speakers' presentations will be available to those who have registered. Don't forget to get your copy of the 2023 funding guide via the ANCAD website and to check out the other training opportunities offered that ANCAD offers via the LIFT website that are brought to you by the Tyndall Foundation. Also, a quick 2-question survey should appear at the end of the webinar. Please take a moment to complete as your feedback is really important and it's valued. Again, apologies for technical issues at the beginning. best laid plans sometime going astray. As I said, we did do practices, but these things happen. Again, thanks to all. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye.